MG Bouchard, maybe it's MG. So he calls out, hey MG, is that you? No response from this thing. So he continues walking towards it, it continues walking towards him. When he gets about 25 feet from it, it stops. Well, John Baxter's feeling a little uneasy about this now. He says, who is that? Still doesn't get an answer. He takes another step forward, and this thing immediately darts off to its right into the woods by the side of the road. John Baxter said he could hear its feet padding across the ground as it ran away from him. You could hear it running through dry leaves and then through a little muddy wet spot at the end of the little gully alongside the road. John Baxter said he chased it for about 8 feet down the small embankment, and when he got to the bottom of the gully, he stopped dead and looked across up at the other side, and standing on top of the little ravine, silhouetted by the empty field behind him, you could see this creature was standing there, and it stopped. He said in the ambient light, he could make out that it had an enormous head, figure-8 shaped. He said it had a tiny little body and a long skinny neck. And at the end of its long limbs were large feet and hands that seemed to have very long digits. He said the rock it was standing on was light-colored, so he could see its toes curving over the top of the rock. And next to it, to its right, there was a small tree about 8 inches in diameter. And he could see that this thing was holding on to the tree with these impossible long digits wrapped around it. He couldn't make out a face in the dark, but he could see these two large, round, shiny eyes staring back at him in the dark. Well, John Baxter decided he'd had enough of this. He didn't know what this thing was and what it was capable of. So with his heart pounding in his chest, he ran back up the little embankment, down the road, made it to Farm Street, where he gratefully accepted the ride of a local couple who took him the rest of the way home. The story still isn't over. The next day, on the 22nd of April, 24 hours after Bill Bartlett's sighting on Farm Street, an 18-year-old named Will Tainter was driving his 15-year-old friend, Abby Brabham, back to her home in the neighboring town of Sherborne, Mass. They were traveling along Springdale Ave, which runs that way. And what we're looking at now is a culvert that runs under the road. That's the Twin River that runs under the road there. Abby said as they were approaching the culvert, she thought she noticed an animal by the left-hand side of the road, down on all fours, facing the car. She wasn't sure what she was looking at, but as the headlights came closer to it, she thought she was looking at a monkey, until it was lit up by the car's headlights. And then she could clearly see this thing was no monkey. It had no fur, no tail. Its skin was an odd beige color, as she observed it. And she said the thing had a ridiculously large head on it, with two huge, round, lidless eyes. She said she saw no ears, no nose, and no mouth. Now, Will was driving, so he didn't get that good of a look at it, but he did say as they went by it, the thing stood up on its rear legs and held its front limbs out at it as they drove by. Later, they said they didn't really notice what it had at the end of its limbs, whether it had hands, hooves, or whatever, because they said it was that enormous head that just absolutely held their attention. Will wanted to turn around and go back and check it out, but Abby Brabham made it quite clear she didn't ever want to see this thing again, and he realized that she was really scared. But it was then that he realized that earlier that day, his friend, John Baxter, had told him some crazy story about seeing some weird creature the night before walking home on Miller Hill, which isn't far from this spot. So he did the right thing. He didn't tell Abby this. Instead, he used the information that he remembered John giving him earlier that day, and he used it to gauge what Abby thought she saw. Apparently, Abby saw the same exact thing that John Baxter saw. And then later, when they were back at school, they found out about Bill Bartlett's sighting on Farm Street. So what did this thing look like? Well, lucky for us, Bill Bartlett is a professional artist. And when he was a teenager, he was quite talented and skilled at drawing and painting. So as soon as he got home that night and told his mom and dad what he had seen, he got his sketch pad out and he drew exactly what he saw. I have a copy of that picture for you right here. Check this out. Now, there is an interesting little note that Bill wrote off to the side. It says, I, Bill Bartlett, swear on a stack of Bibles, I saw this creature. Now, this picture gets even freakier when you learn that John Baxter did the same thing when he got home and told his mom and dad. Now, John Baxter is not an artist like Bill Bartlett, but he did his best to sit down and sketch exactly what he saw. And when you compare the two sketches, the story gets even weird. I got a copy of that sketch. Check this out. It's the same thing. Now, luckily for us, the world-renowned cryptozoologist Loren Coleman was living right here in Massachusetts when this happened. And in less than a week after all this unfolded, he and two of his colleagues were on the case, investigating it thoroughly. They interviewed all the witnesses, and they said these kids were reliable, that they saw something strange. What it was, Coleman and his colleagues couldn't say, but they believed their story. As a matter of fact, they couldn't find anyone in the town of Dover that had anything bad to say about these kids. Even the chief of police said they were good kids, and that, well, he doesn't know about weird creatures, but he believed their story. And to this day, all of them stand by their story. So what was it? Space alien? Fairy goblin? Well, one guy came up with a theory. He was convinced he solved the mystery. He was certain that what these kids saw was nothing more than a baby moose. Loren Coleman took that theory seriously, and he came back and said he couldn't find one fact whatsoever that could support that theory. So I'll leave it to you to decide what this thing was. But what to call it? Well, Loren Coleman took it upon himself to name it for us. He dubbed this creature the Dover Demon. Not that there was anything really demonic about the little guy, it's just, well, it rolled off the tongue. I think you'll find the legend of the Dover Demon good food for thought the next time you find yourself traveling down some dark road at night.